The E2 is Schuberth's latest adventure style peaked helmet. I've been wearing it for a while now, so what's it really like out in the real world? So what exactly is the E2? Well, the simplest answer is to say that it's a C5 with a peak, but there is a little bit more to that, obviously. The venting has been amended. The top vent is a different shape to that of the C5 to enable it to be more effective with the peak in place. The rear exhaust vent is almost twice the size of the C5, and the chin vents are different too. But the visor is exactly the same as the C5, which does give some advantages, but we'll touch on that later. In terms of construction, the E2 has a fiberglass shell reinforced with carbon fiber, a dual density EPS liner as you would expect, and the main visor as well as the drop down sunshade are class 1 optics. The Pinlock 120 even comes pre-installed at the factory, so there's no faffing around with having to do that when your helmet arrives. One thing that surprised me about this helmet is that it only actually has 2 external shell sizes, which is something you normally only see in more budget brands. You would tend to expect with something like this, and at this price you would have 3, 4, maybe more different shell sizes across that size range. The 2 shell sizes themselves cover helmet size from extra small to large. That's in shell 1. Shell 2 is extra large to 3 extra large. But we'll talk more about this when we talk about the fit and comfort a little bit later on. The E2 also features Schuberth's anti-roll-off system. This is made up of 2 straps that run along the lining on the inside of the helmet, and they help prevent the helmet rolling forwards off of your head in a crash. The peak is adjustable in 3 positions. Simply unlock the tabs and lift or drop into one of the 3 desired positions. Then click the locks back into place. I'll talk more about the peak in the noise section of the video, but this is, I think, a useful feature. The helmet also comes pre-fitted with speakers, wiring and the antenna for the SC2 communications unit. This makes it one of the easiest and quickest comms units to fit, because essentially you have to snap in the control panel, the battery at the back and the boom mic at the front. Because this is a sample helmet, mine was already pre-installed when it arrived, but apparently it takes less than 30 seconds to install this system once you take it out of the box. This means that you will be using Sena technology with the SC2, as it's based on their top-of-the-line 50S system. The caveat to that, of course, is that if you want to use your own pre-existing third-party communications unit, that's going to be much trickier to fit. Finally, in the tech roundup, let's talk about the weight. Now, the helmet bare without the peak is 1,670 grams. It comes with the peak, so why they bother doing it, I don't know. But with the peak and the comms unit fitted, that jumps up to 1,850 grams. Okay, that's enough of the tech specs. Let's turn our attention to the first section, which is fit and comfort. I'm usually bang on a size large in pretty much all brands, but I found this on my initial try to be a little bit tight around the forehead. It definitely has a slightly rounder fit than something like a Shoei, for example, but because the internal pads are changeable and they come in different size, that fit can be tweaked. Schuberth have themselves an oval conversion kit, so you've got thicker pads on the inside to fill that gap in there, and you can take a little bit of length out from front to back, so there's lots of options to get that to fit. The guys at Biker Heads actually fitted that stuff for me after I did my initial try on, and the helmet now is pretty much perfect. It's a really nice, snug, comfortable fit. I found it to be a comfortable helmet, and it's got a relatively short break-in period too. The neck roll has a really close fit, and I discovered that I didn't need the optional chin sock extender that comes with the helmet. That's the benefit of having a beard, it fills in all the little gaps. It's quite a compact shell, which I like, so it doesn't give you that pinhead look, but it's also not as roomy as something like the AGV Tour Modular in terms of chin room. It's not a problem, my chin doesn't touch or rub the inside of the helmet even with the boom arm in place, but it's just an obvious that it is less roomy than some other options. The button mechanism for the chin bar does also differ from the C5 slightly, but in a good way, so that means that you don't have that bright red button visible all of the time on the front of the helmet. It's easy to operate with gloved hands, and being EC 2206 certified means that there must be a lock for the open position, and it's situated on the left hand side. Again, very easy to operate, although in reality I don't know how many people will actually use it. I have to say it is a very well balanced helmet, so despite the fact that the weight is relatively high once you've got all of the comms unit and the kit on it, I've never found it to be a problem on all-day rides. I didn't feel like it was a heavy helmet. Some helmets can feel a bit sort of claustrophobic and heavy. I have found that the Schuberth Neotech 2 was a little bit like that, but this, no problem at all. Ventilation is an area where I think the E2 excels. The bottom sliding chin opening has two direct vents, which is backed up by a removable and washable sponge filter. Above that is a smaller switched vent, which is designed to allow air to flow up and keep the visor clear, and it works really well. The top vent has a two-stage opening, and the airflow from this is excellent. On hot days, with all the vents open, the airflow is very good indeed. And on the flip side, when they are all closed, there's no air puffs or leaks getting into the helmet. The exhaust vent is permanently open and seems to do a good job too. From reviews and anecdotes that I've seen, the C5 is regarded as a well-vented helmet, and if anything, I think the E2 is slightly better. Now, although the E2 does have that adventure style peaked helmet, the eye pull isn't as big as a traditional adventure helmet would be. But having said that, the vision is really good, being a little wider and taller than a lot of touring full face helmets. The optical quality of both the main visor and the drop down sunshade are very good indeed. And the drop-down visor itself is also Class 1 optic rated, which isn't seen very often. Changing the visor is an absolute breeze too. Firstly, to remove the peak, turn the dial on each side to the open position and just lift it away. To remove the visor, lift it into the highest position, then on each side by the mechanism you'll find a locking tab. Click that up, then continue to rotate the visor back and it will just pop off. Refitting is simply the reverse. Click the sides into place and rotate it to the closed position. The locking clips will automatically click closed. Very easy and simple. I like it. If you want to ride without the peak, there are a couple of covers in the box that just pop into the hole. The visor itself is permanently locked on and it won't come off, but these covers obviously make it look a little bit more neater, probably cut down on the noise and keeps the water out too. One quick tip is that the C5 visors fit the E2 too. And the benefit of that is that there is no opening on the sides of these because the C5 doesn't have a peak. So as you can see with this, those plugs aren't required, and I must admit the helmet does look good with the dark visor, particularly in this grey colour. There's also the city position mechanism, which means that the position you leave the visor in when you open the chin bar, it returns to that position when you close it. I must admit, a modular helmet not doing that has never really bothered me in the past, but now that I've been using this, I can see that it's a benefit. It's a small one, but it's a benefit nonetheless. Noise is a contentious issue when it comes to helmet reviews because, as I point out in every one, there's so many factors at play that can affect how noisy a helmet is for you. How the helmet fits, what bike you ride, how tall you are, and to a certain extent what clothing you're wearing all play a part in the noise that you'll hear on that helmet. However, Schuberth do have a reputation for making quiet helmets, and I have to say that that has been my experience so far with the E2. The close-fitting neck roll and the chin sock do a really good job at closing off the underside of the helmet, and that's where, at speed at least, the majority of noise comes from. A peak will of course always add an element of noise to a helmet, and when I first wore this riding the Africa Twin, I was getting a vibration through the peak which was creating a bit of a buzz in the helmet, and it was annoying. It wasn't massively loud, or actually it wasn't even very loud, but it was annoying. Now I realised that the peak was in its very highest position, so I clicked it down to the middle position and boom, the the vibration and the hum stopped. It's all about airflow, so you'll need to experiment with this for your particular bike. I switched across to a naked bike and I had no issues at all. The snug fit and the compact shape make this, for me, a very quiet helmet. There's also very little grab from the peak. The only time that it was noticeable was when the chin bar was raised, and that's to be expected. But then you're unlikely to be riding at a high speed with the chin bar up anyway. Opening vents on a helmet does obviously create noise, but even with all of these vents open, it still put the E2 in the very quiet category for me. I guess that means these turbulator triangles on the visor do make a difference, but honestly, the better the helmet fits you, the quieter it's going to be. In general though, I would say this is a quiet helmet. So is there anything I don't like about the helmet? To be honest, not much really. It could be a little bit lighter, but in reality, that didn't really make too much difference to me. Some people won't like the inflexibility of the proprietary internal comms unit, and I understand that. Unless you go for black, the contrast of the vents and the visor stand out a bit. Again, only an aesthetic observation, but on lighter coloured helmets, that top vent mechanism does look pretty chonky. Outside of those points, in the time that I've been wearing the E2, I've found it to be a practical, capable, comfortable and quiet helmet to wear. So it's a thumbs up from me. So in my opinion, this is a very good helmet, but one question might be, should you buy this or should you just buy the C5? And that's not necessarily an easy question to answer. Normally, I would suggest if you ride off-road at all, then buy the E2. But it's not necessarily as straightforward as that with this helmet. There's no benefit in terms of vision because the eye port is exactly the same size with the C5 and the E2. Now this might be a controversial statement, but I think a lot of adventure bike riders wear peaked helmets because of the looks. It's part of the look of riding that style of bike. Yes, a peak is very handy as a sunshade, although this one obviously does have a drop-down sun visor, and it's also very good for protecting you from roost when riding on the trails. But I don't think this is the sort of helmet where people are going to be encountering that too much either. The biggest advantage of traditional adventure style helmets obviously is that big eye port and the ability to wear goggles to get more airflow through the helmet, and obviously goggles are just not going to work with the E2. My take on it is that the helmets are pretty similarly priced, to be honest. So the E2 makes sense because you've got the best of both worlds. You have the peak for if and when you want to use it, but if you take that peak off, then the E2 also becomes a very good road or adventure touring helmet in its own right. So it makes sense to me that the E2 would be the one to plump for if you're caught between the two. Before I finish off, I just want to say a big thank you to the team at Bikerheads who lent me this sample helmet to ride in and bring you this review. Thanks guys, that is very much appreciated. Now I think I've covered off all of the key points on this helmet, but if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section down below. I'd love to hear from you, and all that leaves me to say is until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.